Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. I'm Kris. I couldn't sleep, so I might as well record. This is the Fat Electrician. This is the Fat Electrician, right? Not the Fat Files. Yeah, the Fat Electrician. The father of America's Navy, John Paul Jones, JPJ. If you know anything about the Revolutionary War, yeah, he was a madman. Before we get started, though, click that thumbs up, subscribe to the channel. That helps me out tremendously. See how easy it was? It's free. You can donate to the channel through the thanks button. Click on that and request a video, and then your name sponsors that video. It's my way of saying thank you. Still request without, just takes a little more time. Okay, this is going to be broken into two parts. I got to get rid of this. Two 22-some-minute videos. So, here we go.
Behind every big movement in history, there's a hero, and that hero seemingly gets all of the credit, but behind that hero are other men that were deemed too rough around the edges to get any of the fame. For every George Washington, there's a Daniel Morgan. For every Abraham Lincoln, there's a Cassius Clay. For every Omar Bradley, there's a terrible Terry Allen. And for the United States Navy, there's this man. Today we're talking about John Paul Jones, the father of the United States Navy. Ladies and gentlemen, it's pretty well understood that America won the Revolutionary War by utilizing guerrilla warfare tactics. What's less understood is that while American Revolutionary War heroes like Daniel Morgan, Andrew Pickens, and Francis Marion were conducting guerrilla warfare in the United States, John Paul Jones was utilizing guerrilla warfare tactics on the water and taking that fight all the way to the British, becoming the first man to attack Great Britain on their own turf in over 100 years. He was the first man to raise an American flag on the first ever U.S. Navy commissioned warship, the USS Alfred. He was there and he participated when the United States Marine Corps made its first amphibious landing in history. He was the first American to ever capture a British warship, and to the best of my knowledge, he was the last American Revolutionary War hero to be brought back home and laid to rest. And we're going to get to it right after a word from our sponsor.
Delete me.
Where did you get a aggressive forward business? Well, they're on the event. 6 months data broke 1,000 robots selling your, and then the again, which Our story begins in 1747 when a young John Paul is born. Note, it is just John Paul, not John Paul Jones, yet. He was born in Kirkby in Scotland on the prestigious Abbeyland estate where his father was the head gardener. And this is also where he grew up because they lived on the estate because his father was the head gardener, and this gave him a different childhood than many other people. It's this weird dichotomy that John Paul and his family are lower servant class people, but because they live on the estate, they're surrounded by the wealthy aristocrats all day, every day, 24/7. So John Paul is well educated from a young age. He can read, he can write, he's articulate, he knows how to walk, talk, act, dress the part of an aristocrat, but no matter what, at the end of the day, he's just the gardener's son.
You want I should treat him like white folks?
No. What's the name of that Peckerwood boy from town that works with the glass?
Oh, you mean Jerry?
That's the boy's name, Jerry. You just treat him like you would Jerry.
John sees and feels this treatment his entire childhood, and it doesn't take long for him to catch on that he's never not going to be the gardener's son. So he has to come up with a way to change his stars, so to speak. And the easiest way to go about that is for him to pursue a career in the Navy and become a captain of a ship. And captains back then, referred to as masters, are almost always part of the aristocratic, wealthy society. So that's what he wants to do. He becomes an apprentice on a merchant marine vessel at the age of 13 years old. For the next 4 years, between the ages of 13 and 17, he apprentices on a ship called the Friendship, learning anything and everything he can about how to be a good sailor. Then after 4 years, the Friendship ends up getting sold, and 17-year-old John Paul is out of a job and unemployed. So he takes the first job that he can get, which unfortunately is working on a slave ship in the transatlantic slave trade. He does that for several years and he hates it the entire time. He finds the slave trade to be absolutely disgusting, later in his own writings describing it as an abominable trade. Which, while obviously true, it's also worth mentioning that these were pretty progressive views to have in the 1700s, especially for a simple gardener's son. Regardless, John Paul had those opinions, and for that reason, he quits. And when he quit at port in Jamaica. He was halfway through a two-way trip and he just quit there. He couldn't do it anymore. So now he's basically stranded in Jamaica. So he hangs around the ports looking for a new job that isn't in the slave trade. He ends up meeting Samuel McAdams, the captain of the brig John, who offers him a ride back to Britain if he's willing to work on the trip, to which he immediately agrees. So they set sail, they start making their way back to Britain, and then along the way, Captain McAdams ends up getting yellow fever and dies, which is, horrible, but also at the end of the day, as far as the crew's concerned, not that big of a deal. We have a first mate. There's a chain of command for a reason. The first mate takes over. A couple weeks later, the first mate gets yellow fever and he dies too. Now, that sucks also. However, there's probably a third guy in the chain of command that's now going to take over. but there isn't. You see, at this point in time, being able to navigate on the ocean was kind of like protected tradecraft. They didn't want everybody on a ship knowing how to navigate the ocean. So usually it was just the captain and the first mate that actually knew how to do it, and everybody else was just kind of following orders. So now the two dudes that had the skill to navigate their way back home are both dead, and nobody knows what the fuck they're doing, and they're basically stranded out at sea. But luckily, the 20-year-old kid they picked up in Jamaica had been studying to be the best sailor that he could for the past 7 years, and he actually knew how to navigate the ocean. He takes command of the ship, brings it all the way back to Britain, no problem. The owner of the Brig John finds out what happened. He hears about this 20-year-old hotshot they picked up in Jamaica that was able to navigate his ship from being lost at sea, and he figures, fuck it, I'm just gonna make this kid the captain, and that's exactly what he does. John Paul is now master of the ship. He has changed his stars. He should be in the aristocratic class now. But the Brig John is a really small ship. He needs to keep working as a captain and work his way up so he's a captain of a much larger vessel, and that'll cement his role as a gentleman. So that's what he does. For the next 3 years, he just continues being the captain of the Brig John, making voyages across the Atlantic and back, and it's kind of a struggle the entire time because a lot of the men under his command are older, more experienced sailors, and they don't think they should have to be taking orders from some 20 to 23-year-old kid that was the son of a gardener. Despite that difficulty, it never really becomes a huge issue until 1770, when one of his crew members by the name of Mungo Maxwell decided that he's from a wealthy Scottish family, and there's no way in hell he's taking orders from the son of a gardener that's younger than him. He tries to get some of the crew to join with him to stir up a mutiny. They're going to throw John Paul overboard. He's going to take over the ship. John Paul finds out about this. He orders him to be flogged with 12 lashes from the cat of nine tails, which seems extreme, but at this point in time, it was completely standard practice. Mungo Maxwell learned his lesson. He just sits down and shuts the fuck up for the rest of the trip. They make their way over to the West Indies. They port. He says, fuck you, I quit. He leaves. John Paul's like, okay, whatever. Drops off his cargo, picks up his other batch of cargo. He heads back to Britain. Upon making port back in Britain, John Paul is immediately placed in shackles and arrested and put on trial for the murder of Mungo Maxwell. Apparently, after leaving John Paul's ship, he found another ship that took off sooner than John Paul did, headed back to Britain, and on that ship, he got yellow fever and he died along the voyage, and now his wealthy Scottish family is claiming that John Paul murdered him. So John Paul has to post bail, get permission from the court to travel back to the West Indies, get documentation from the port authorities saying that Mungo Maxwell was there, he was alive, and John Paul didn't kill him. He gets that documentation, then he has to find out the other ship that he took back to Britain, track down that captain, and get documents from that captain saying, yeah, he was on my ship, he got yellow fever, he died. He gets all those documentations, goes back to the court. His name is legally cleared, but this whole process takes like 6 months, and his name is getting drugged through the mud in the court of public opinion the entire time. So while he's legally not a murderous captain, a lot of people don't know that. So that sucks, but there's nothing he can do, so he just keeps doing his job. And then 2 years later, he is given a promotion. He's given the command of a much larger cargo ship called the Betsy. And the Betsy is a humongous cargo ship. It's one of the biggest ones that Britain has. So at this point, he should definitely be in that wealthy aristocratic class. He should be a gentleman, and he starts going to the dinner parties, you know, with the powdered wigs and all the bullshit, and he's allowed to be there, but at the end of the day, he can still feel that everybody's looking down on him because no matter what he does, he's still the son of a gardener. And at this point, he's starting to think to himself in the back of his head, like, okay, I'm gonna keep doing this, I'm gonna make a bunch of money, and then I'm gonna move over to the United States. I'm gonna live in Virginia with my brother who's been living there for years as a tailor, and I'm just gonna retire in the United States in the new world where there's a new opportunity. There's not hundreds of years of, you know, I'm from this family or that family. Everything's new. That's going to be my new start. But before he can do that, he's got to earn enough money so that he can show up to the United States as a rich man. So he keeps working. And then in 1773, shit hits the fan. On one of his voyages, his ship gets damaged in a storm and he has to make an unplanned port in Ireland, stop, have the ship repaired. Then once the ship is repaired, he gets sick for like 3 weeks. And while that's going on, a lot of the cargo ends up getting spoiled. So by the time he makes it to the port that he was originally supposed to be at, he doesn't have all the cargo to sell. He sells what cargo's still good, makes enough money to pick up his next load of cargo, and he heads back to the UK. The problem is he now doesn't have enough money to pay all the sailors under his command while they're at sea, which wouldn't seem like a big deal. It's not like you can fucking do anything with the money while you're out in the middle of the ocean, but apparently some people got got really upset about it. One of his sailors got drunk and decided to attack him with a club, and when he came at John with the club, John drew his sword and stabbed the man straight through the chest, killing him almost immediately. Now, that's a clear-cut case of self-defense. However, John realizes that a lot of his men are pissed off they haven't been paid. A lot of men are friends with that guy. He's dead. He's worried that his crew isn't going to stick up for him, and on top of that, he still has the reputation as a murderous captain, even though that was complete bullshit. Time to go. So John, fearing he's not going to get a fair trial, flees to America and starts living in Virginia with his brother, the Taylor. Now, this is late 1773. He's now stuck in Virginia. He's basically lost his career as a ship captain. He adopts the last name Jones, becomes John Paul Jones, attempting to not be found. He doesn't really know what to do with himself. Presumably, he's depressed. He just kind of hangs out at his brother's house all day. He's reading, doing philosophy, poetry, just trying to take his mind off the fact that his entire life plan has just been completely derailed. Then in 1775, the American Revolution.
I don't know much. I haven't said anything. I don't know much about his life before the revolution. There is a movie about him. Robert Stack plays him. Robert Stack from Unsolved Mysteries. Oh, I'm glitching. Sorry. Robert Stack from Unsolved Mysteries. Do 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 do. Yeah, it's a mediocre movie, but it highlights like some of his life, not his whole life that I remember, but oh well. Just had to pause it because I haven't done any speaking.
Kicks off, and holy shit, this is his chance. He can go serve in the United States Navy and make something of himself. So he immediately heads off to Philadelphia and volunteers to join the United States Navy, which at this point doesn't even exist yet. And at this point, not a lot of experienced men were going to volunteer to join the United States Navy because the Continental Congress was issuing letters of marque or marquee. A letter of marque was basically a permission slip from the Continental Congress, the government of the United States, to go out and be a pirate. If you were some random dude and you had a boat with guns on it and you wanted to take that boat and go rob the British, you were absolutely welcome to do so. Bring your loot back to America and you could keep it. Which meant that pretty much all the experienced sailors in America were given those two options. You could join the United States Navy, be treated like a peon and get a small amount of money for your service, or you could go be a state-sanctioned pirate and maybe win the lottery. Who knows? Most people are taking that second option, but not John Paul Jones. So John Paul Jones gets commissioned as a lieutenant right out of the gate, and he is serving under Captain Essex Hopkins, the man that's in charge of the entire United States Navy at this point, aboard the USS Alfred, the United States Navy's first ever commissioned warship. And while serving there, John Paul Jones is the first man to ever raise the Grand Union flag aboard the USS Alfred. If you don't know, the Grand Union flag is essentially, in my opinion, the first American flag. It still has the British flag in the upper left-hand corner, where today we have 50 stars, but it has the stripes for the 13 colonies. And the message was clear. This was 1775. America hadn't declared its independence yet, but there was a rebellion going on. So the meaning behind that flag was, hey, we're united, we're armed, we're ready to fight, but we're still willing to reconcile if you agree to start treating us appropriately. And that's why they left the British flag in the upper corner. That didn't last for very long. While serving as lieutenant on the USS Alfred, John Paul Jones is having his crew drill over and over and over again how to fire the cannons. He wants to get them to the point that they can fire this cannon once every 15 seconds because he knows that's why the British Navy is so good. They drill their battle drills over and over and over again like a well-oiled machine. The problem is the United States Navy has no funding. The British have cut off the supply of all of the gunpowder, all of the cannons, all the cannonballs, all the supplies. So they're just drilling it dry, going through the motions over and over and over again. Which also highlights the problem. We need guns, we need gunpowder, we have to get supplies. So in March of 1776, the United States Navy, under the command of Essex Hopkins, decides that they are going to, for the first time in US Navy history, project power. They are going to go out on the offensive and attack New Providence, the capital of the Bahamas. And that's because it is a major British military outpost with a ton of military supplies, cannons, gunpowder, guns, uniforms, everything. They're going to go in there, take it over, and steal all those supplies so they can continue fighting this war. So they're getting ready to take off, and 234 seemingly random dudes show up with guns. These guys are like, some of them are wearing civilian clothing with like hunting coats, some of them are wearing blue coats, some of them have green coats. It's just this ragtag crew of dudes with guns, and they are under the command of Captain Samuel Nicholas. And these are America's first Marines, literally men recruited out of a bar, Ton Tavern, a few months prior, and they're coming too. The Marine Corps just got founded. They don't even have official uniforms yet, but they're already showing up to fight.
I have come here to chew bubblegum and kick ass, and I'm all out of bubblegum.
So they make their way down to the Bahamas, and once they get to the port where the actual military base is, it becomes very obvious that the British know that they're there, they know why they're coming, and they're ready to defend it. Commander Hopkins is about to just sail directly into the port, into all the gunfire, and just slug it out. At which point, John Paul Jones goes, or, hear me out, we've got 234 Marines in the back of the ships. Why don't we just sail around, not go through all the gunfire, land on an unoccupied beach, let the Marines get out and go take everything over? Essex Hopkins agrees, and that's exactly what happens. 234 Marines and 50 sailors make their amphibious landing on the beach. They then immediately go, they capture the city of Nassau and the British Fort Montague, all in one fell swoop. They captured 88 cannons, 15 mortars, 68 barrels of gunpowder, a bunch of guns, a bunch of other military supplies, and they took the British governor Montfort Brown as their prisoner. And Montfort Brown would later complain that the Marines and the Navy men drank all of his booze out of the governor's palace, officially cementing the American military tradition of win, get hammered, repeat. From here, they make their way back to America. John Paul Jones is promoted to captain, and he is given control of the USS Providence, a 12-gun sloop. The only problem is the British Navy has put up a blockade, essentially trying to force the American ships to stay inside the harbor. That way, we can't interrupt their supply lines. John Paul Jones doesn't really give a fuck. He waits for one night when it's dark, it's foggy, slips through the blockade, and then just starts fucking shit up with what amounts to guerrilla warfare tactics on the water. John Paul Jones and the crew of the Providence proceed to go out and start capturing British merchant vessels left and right. They have multiple run-ins with British warships that try to stop him, but they're never able to quite pull it off. The HMS Solo Bay gets clever, and they try to raise the Grand Union flag, signaling to John Paul Jones that they're actually an ally, at which point John Paul's not buying it, but he pretends like he does. So he lowers his sails, basically sending the signal like, go ahead and approach and we'll have a conversation. And as the ship gets close, they veer off, and they're actually trying to set up a full broadside run. But at the perfect moment, he raises the sails and speeds away, and now they're headed the opposite direction, and they're not going to be able to get turned back around in time to catch him.
Thank you, Commodore, for getting us ready to make way.
On another occasion, the HMS Millstone chases him for 8 hours straight, shooting cannons at him the entire time, and they miss every single one of them. And on the 8th hour, right as it becomes apparent they're not going to be able to catch him and he is going to get away, he orders one of his Marines to fire a single musket shot to compliment the captain of the HMS Milestone on his beautiful marksmanship. They then proceed to go and capture even more British merchant vessels. They capture 16 in total. Then John Paul Jones realizes that the British military is eating an awful lot of fish for food, and all that fish is coming from a bunch of fishing villages in Nova Scotia, and he's about to put an end to that shit. So the USS Providence rolls up, sinks the first ship, sinks the second ship. The third ship is looking pretty awesome, so they decide they're gonna go ahead, board it. They get on board. They don't like it, so they light it on fire, get back on the USS Providence, and then destroy 12 more ships. Then they commandeer 5 of them and sail them back to America.
Look at me, sure. I'm the captain now.
At this point, Congress is like, holy shit, John Paul Jones is putting in fucking work. So they give him the USS Alfred. That's going to be his flagship. Now he's got his own little fleet because he's still going to maintain control of the USS Providence, and he's also picking up the USS Hamsden. He immediately takes a small fleet back up to Nova Scotia, captures 5 more ships, burns another one down, raids the entire coastline, and burns down an entire warehouse full of whale oil. Okay, that's great for the war effort, but now John Paul Jones has a huge problem on his hands because the American Navy's having a big issue issue with recruiting because everybody's opting to go where all the money is, and that's in privateering under a letter of marque. So he was shorthanded when he left America, and now that he just picked up 5 more ships, he's absolutely shorthanded. So he ends up recruiting people from Nova Scotia to operate some of these ships for him. That's fine. Next mission, he receives word he needs to go to a coal mine in Nova Scotia, sail up there. There's a bunch of American prisoners being held there by the British military. He needs to launch a raid and free them. On the way there, they run across a massive British transport ship called the Malesh. So he pulls right up with his Marines, boards the ship, takes it over. On board, there is 10,000 winter uniforms for the British, commandeers the entire vessel, continues towards the objective. By this point, the USS Providence is in rough shape, and so is its crew. Everybody's overworked. The Providence is leaking. They want to turn back, but John Paul Jones is like, no, we got to keep moving forward. Just keep it together. We're going to get through this. He gives a speech. He feels like he improved morale. Apparently he didn't, because the USS Providence basically has mutiny. They turn the ship around in the middle of the night and they flee. That sucks, but he still has the Alfred, still has the Hampton, and he's got all the other fishing vessels and that transport that he captured. He continues on his way to Sydney, Nova Scotia to free these prisoners. He gets to Sydney, Nova Scotia, finds out the prisoners have actually switched sides and they're now working for the British, very similar to how the Nova Scotia people are now working for him on all his captured vessels. So just part of the game. The problem now is that his little fleet has been caught up to and is being chased by the HMS Solo Bay and the HMS Wilford, 2 fairly large British warships, and he does not want to get in a gunfight with these guys. So that night, John Paul Jones has a genius plan. Okay, he's got all these captured ships and he has his 2 American naval vessels. So what he decides to do is he tells one of his captured ships, loads it up entirely with the Nova Scotians that are working for him, because he knows that they're not going to be held liable when they get captured, right? All they're going to have to do if the British capture them is be like, look, we were his prisoners, we had to follow orders or he was going to kill us, so they're going to get away scot-free. What he has them do is he has them hang a lantern up on their ship and sail a different direction while his other ships kill all light and continue sailing back towards Boston. The British warships take the bait, they chase down this fishing vessel all night, and by the time the sun is up and they realize what happened, John Paul Jones and his little fleet are long gone. So John Paul Jones makes it back to America, and technically the mission may be considered a failure because he didn't rescue the 300 prisoners, but there weren't actually 300 prisoners to rescue because they had switched sides. He captured all these naval vessels, and more importantly, he captured those 10,000 winter uniforms, which had a humongous impact on all of America. Those 10,000 winter uniforms were then worn by the American forces at Valley Forge during winter and kept them from freezing to death, and they are the exact same uniforms that Americans wore when they crossed the Delaware River on Christmas. Now at this point, John Paul Jones is kicking ass, right? He's doing more for the war effort on the naval front than literally anyone else in the entire US Navy. And in his mind, he's thinking, they're going to make me the first admiral in American history. This is going to be fucking awesome. He gets back to Boston. He finds out not only is he not going to be made an admiral, he's actually getting demoted. Apparently, in John Paul Jones' absence, aka while he was out winning a war, the government decided that they should have a comprehensive list of their naval officers and how important they are and base rank off of that. And for some reason, John Paul Jones is ranked 18th. And every single man ranked higher than him on this list is ranked that high because they're either friends with somebody or they're somebody's kid. Basically, it's the same bullshit the British were doing with their aristocracy. They're rewarding...
Yeah, they used to be able to buy their rank. And that was a lot of them how they got into it. Think John Andre from the Revolutionary War, the one who... was involved with Benedict Arnold. Like he came from a rich family. He just bought his way in and bought his title. He was a major. So, yeah, it was easier to do it that way than to work through it, and it was accepted, which is the crazy part.
Connections and not ability and merit and getting the fucking job done. So John Paul Jones is absolutely pissed. They take away his fleet, they take away the USS Alfred, and they give him a smaller sloop called the USS Ranger and give him orders to sail to France, where he is going to meet up with Benjamin Franklin, where he is supposedly going to pick up a new frigate, an actual warship with a ton of guns. So there's a little bit of a silver lining. He makes his way over to France.
We're going to go ahead and stop it there for part 1. We'll be back with part 2. Sorry, I'm not talking a whole lot. I'm enjoying it, but it's 3:30 in the morning and I just couldn't sleep. So thought might as well do a video. And I'm just more interested in John Paul Jones than I am really talking. So it's a benefit for you, I guess. Okay, we'll end this here. This is part 1. We'll be back with part 2. Till then, have a good day. Have a good night.